Brachos Daf Tes Zayin contains two Mishnayos. From the beginning of the Daf until the first Mishnah has a statement about Bilam's bracha to Klal Yisrael, and then it jumps into the halachos of somebody who made a mistake while he was reading Shema. So let's see what the Gemara says. Gemara quotes Rabbi Chama bar Rabbi Chanina, and he says in Bilam's bracha he has together oyalim, tents. Rashi says refers to a base medrash, and nechalim, rivers. The pasuk says, talking about matoivu oyholecho Yaakov, it says kinechalim nitayu ke'aholim nota, the few words in between. So it connects the two very similar expressions. So what's the connection between tents and rivers? The Gemara says rivers take a person from tumah to tahara. It performs as a mikvah. Base medrash takes a person from being chayva to zchus. It takes a person from being guilty, worthy of intense judgment, to being innocent. Now the Gemara goes into the halachas of somebody who made a mistake. The Mishnah said somebody who made a mistake and read in the wrong order is not yetza. So the Gemara wants to know, what should he do if you messed up? You don't know where you are now. You got confused what you're supposed to be saying. So the Gemara has the following story. The Gemara says that Rabbi Ami and Rav Asi were preparing a chuppah for Rav Elazar. They decided to take a break and go inside to the nearby base medrash and see what was being said, and he said, I'll come back and report to you what's being said over there. So the Gemara says that somebody was saying in front of Rabbi Yechanan that if you make a mistake, you have to go back to the last known place where you were. So if you made a mistake in the middle of a parsha, you have to go back to the beginning of the parsha. If you made a mistake between parshas, meaning you ended a parsha, you don't know which one, so you have to go back to the first parsha, which you could be in. You have to go back to V'hayim Shemaya, because you don't know if you ended that or if you ended the one after. If you made a mistake between ksiva and ksiva, you know you said uchsavtam somewhere, you don't know which one. You don't know if you're in the first parsha of Shema or the second one. So you should go back to the first one. So Rabbi Yechanan said to the Tana who was explaining this, he said, this is all only up until Laman Yirbu Yemechem. Once you said Laman Yirbu Yemechem, it's not confusing from there on in. You don't have repeated words or phrases, mistameh means. You don't have uchsavtams and ukshartams, lavavchas, lavavchems. So from there on, you could just assume you said it correctly. You could just keep on. A person knows that well, and he goes with the flow. So you can just assume you said it correctly, and if you're not sure, keep going up until MS. So he came back, wherever it was, and he reported to the people who are working on the chuppah, this is what I heard. And they said, oh, Givaldi, if we would not have come here except for this, it would be worth the trip. The Mishnah, until the next Mishnah, discusses the halachos of somebody who is distracted from saying Shema. The Gemara refers to distractions of somebody who's working, and he has to be busy working. And the Gemara will talk about a chassan. The Mishnah will also speak about a chassan who is distracted and his attention is preoccupied with his upcoming wedding and what comes afterwards. So the Mishnah discusses the halacha of a worker saying Shema and davening Shemona Esrei. So the Mishnah says as follows: a worker is allowed to say Shema on top of a tree where he's working on the tree, or on top of a wall where he's standing at the top of a wall. That's Shema. Shema, he doesn't necessarily have to have such strong a kavanah, but Shemona Esrei, he's not allowed to say it on the top of the tree or the wall. He has to come down below. Now the Gemara will quote a brisa which adds details to this halacha of workers and Shemona Esrei, and it will say it depends what type of tree he's in. If he's in an olive tree or a date tree, he can stay in the tree because it's pretty secure up there, it has wide branches, and he's not afraid to fall. Any other type of tree, you can't daven Shemona Esrei because you can't concentrate, you're too afraid to fall. The Brisa then adds that a balabayas, somebody who is the owner of the operation, there has no excuse to pray in the tree. He should come down. Why is a worker more lenient? Because he can't do what he wants with his time. His time is sold to the person who's paying him. But the person who's in charge, nobody's paying him. It's his own business, so he doesn't have an excuse that I'm working for somebody. Stop making so much money. Come down out of the tree. Say Shemona Esrei like you're supposed to, even if it's a wide tree with wide branches like an olive tree or a date tree. There's no such excuse. Now, the next thing that the Mishnah had mentioned was a chassan. So the Mishnah says that a chassan, somebody who's getting married, does not have to say Shema the night of the wedding, all the way until the coming Matzoi Shabbos, or until he consummates the marriage properly, whichever comes first. Because the stress of consummating the marriage that it puts on the chassan's mind is too much for him to be able to focus, and the Gemara seems to indicate also that it's considered like he's involved in a mitzvah, so he doesn't have to do it. Now the Mishnah continues and says, if somebody is a big person and he says, I'm going to have kavanah anyway, I'm not going to be disturbed by this, the Mishnah implies that he's allowed to. It quotes that Rabban Gamliel on the night that he got married said Shema, and his Talmidim said, "Well, I thought you taught us that you're not supposed to say Shema if you're chassan." He said, "I didn't say not supposed to." I said, "You don't have to, but you will not force me to give up my Kabbalah's Al Malchus Shemayim for even 1 second." The Gemara now brings two contradictory brisas about a worker saying Shema as to whether or not he's allowed to concentrate. He's allowed to say Shema when he's working, or does he need to concentrate on Shema? It brings two contradictory brisas about a worker saying Shemona Esrei, whether he's allowed to take off time from work to say Shemona Esrei. As far as a chassan not saying Shema, the Gemara will have a lengthy explanation looking for the source. So let's go through it. The Gemara first of all says we have our brisa and we have our Mishnah, which say clearly that a worker is allowed to say Shema while he's working. But on the other hand, we learned that it says Haskesu Shema. Klal Yisrael has to stop and listen when you're saying Shema. You have to be paying full attention to Shema. You're not allowed to be working while you're doing it. So how are you allowed to say Shema while you're working? So the Gemara says that this question was asked by Rav Mari, the son of the daughter of Shmuel to Rava. Why was he called the son of the daughter of Shmuel? Shmuel had a daughter named Rachel who was captured by some kind of a group of thugs, and by the time she was returned, she was pregnant with a son. So this son, whose name was Rav Mari, his father was a goy, so he converted. Since he converted, he's not listed after his father, he's listed after his mother, who was the daughter of Shmuel. So he's called Rav Mari, the son of the daughter of Shmuel. So he asked Rava this stira, and Rava didn't have an answer. So he said, did you hear anything? So he said, I heard Rav Sheshes had an answer. Rav Sheshes said they have to stop working while they say Shema. The point is that they're allowed to stay on the tree, but they have to stop working. So the Gemara says, but we have a brisa where Bishil says clearly that they're allowed to be continuing to work. The Gemara says the answer to the series is that it depends which parak of Shema you're saying. The first parak you have to concentrate on, you got to stop working. The second paragraph, you can continue working while you say it because concentration is not as important there. Now it turns its attention to a worker saying Shemona Esrei, not just Kriya Shema. Now, Kriya Shema, we said, is not such a tremendous obligation to focus, but Shemona Esrei, you have a very strong obligation to focus, and not allowed to say it in the top of the tree at all. You have to completely stop. So there won't be any discussion about whether he's allowed to continue to work or not. The question will be how much time is he allowed to take off from work in order to be busy with his tefillos. So the Gemara has a contradiction between two brises. The first one says as follows. The first one says the worker is allowed to do everything he ordinarily would. He's allowed to say full Shema Esrei, the brachos before, the brachos after. He's allowed to say birchas hamazon with the brachos, everything just the way he would. The only thing he's not allowed to do, he's not allowed to be the chazan, and he's not allowed to do birchas kahanim, should he happen to be a kohen, because that wastes too much time from the work. The Gemara asks, there's a different brisa that says he should say a shortened version of Shema Esrei. First three brachas, the first three, the last three, and a middle bracha that's a combination of the remaining ones. So it's a stira. So Gemara says, no, it's a machlokes. Rabban Gamliel says you should always say a full Shemona Esrei, and Rabbi Yeshua says you should never say a full Shemona Esrei. A person should always say a shortened Shemona Esrei. Gemara says that can't be what's going on over here, because then it wouldn't make sense that this is applied to a worker. If this is the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, who says that a person should always say a shortened Shemona Esrei, it wouldn't say that a worker should. It applies to everybody. And Gemara says, okay, so the difference is as follows. There's two types of workers. There's a worker who's working for his food. He gets a meal in exchange for his work. And then there's a worker who gets paid for his work per hour, per work. Now, the point of a worker who's paid for his work with a meal is that he gets a flat rate. It doesn't matter what the timing situation is. The worker who's being paid for his work has to make sure to do his work as quickly as he can. He can't stretch out the job. So he has to daven a short Shemona Esrei. He has a right to daven Shemona Esrei, but shortened. a worker gets a flat rate, so he's allowed to take more time off. The Gemara now brings a brisa which spells this out clearly. It says that a worker who is working for his food, or the Baal Bayis is with him, the boss is with him, and he's eating together with him, and he's praying together with him, so he sees it, it's okay. Those two situations he's allowed to take longer. But if you're getting paid per job, per hour, then you have to make sure that you rush it up. The Gemara now discusses a chassan who does not have to say Shema. So the Gemara looks for the source. This is going to be a repeat of a Gemara that we have in the second parak, where the Gemara runs through the sources that a chassan and somebody who's in the middle of a mitzvah does not have to say Shema. So the Gemara brings the pasuk b'shivtecha b'veisecha, you should say Shema in your sittings in your house, v'lachtecha v'derech, and in your goings on the way. The Gemara says this is to exclude somebody who's in the middle of a mitzvah or somebody who's a chassan. The Gemara says, what do these psukim have to do with somebody who's doing a mitzvah or as a chassan? So the Gemara first says because it's linked to somebody traveling on the road. Somebody who's traveling on the road or similar activities should say Shema. Traveling on the road is an optional activity. Somebody who's in the middle of a mitzvah or a chassan is not an optional activity. Shema doesn't apply to him. The Gemara says, who says traveling on the road is an optional activity? There's lots of traveling on the road that's for a mitzvah. It's not an optional activity, and yet it still says you should be saying Shema. So the Gemara takes a slightly different approach. The Gemara says, because it says b'shivtecha v'lechtecha, in your sittings in your house and in your goings. Your sittings and your goings, as opposed to sittings and goings that's for a mitzvah. It could have said b'sheves and b'leches, sitting and going. It doesn't say that. It says your sittings and your going. So therefore we see that if you're in the middle of something which is not your own optional activity, you don't have to say Shema. So the Gemara says, if that's true, then how come the halach is that somebody who's marrying an almana, a widow, does have to say Shema? So the Gemara answers, it's not just about the mitzvah, it's also about the fact that he is preoccupied. When one is marrying a basula who was never married before, it's more concerning. The consummation of the marriage is a bit of a stressful thing, so therefore he doesn't have to say Shema. So the Gemara says, okay, if you're telling me that it's about stress, so then somebody who lost investment, his ship sunk in the sea, shouldn't have to say Shema. The Gemara says it's a combination of the two things. A stressful state which is related to a mitzvah that a person's involved in, that's a reason to not say Shema. That includes a chassan. The second Mishnah on the Daf contains a list of things that Rabbi Gamliel did which surprised his students, just like we saw in the last Mishnah, because he had taught them otherwise. And they asked him and how he explained why he did what he did. The Gemara goes on to discuss slaves and how we make sure that we do not have our slaves confused with people who are of upstanding lineage. The Gemara then says a couple of nice things about somebody who says Shema and Shemona Esrei correctly, and then the Gemara gives a list of different ways that Talmidei Chachamim would end off their tefillah, what they would say after Shemona Esrei, and that list continues into the next page, and some of those items will sound familiar to us. So the Mishnah says as follows. In addition to what we saw in the previous Mishnah, that Rabbi Gamliel said Shema on his wedding night, although he had taught his Talmidim that they don't have to, another thing he did was that he took a shower, a bath, he washed himself on the night after his wife had passed away and was buried, and he was an Avel, or an Einain, depending when the burial was, but he bathed. So the Talmidim said, I thought the halachas you're not supposed to bathe. He said, I'm different, I'm very finicky, I'm an istanis. It'll be very greatly painful for me if I'm not going to bathe. The Gemara asks, how is that an excuse? The Gemara answers, he held that the night following the day of the burial is only a ninus midrabanon, it's not doiraisa, and that, therefore the halacha that one is not allowed to bathe in is midrabanon, and the Rabbanon never made their rules in a situation where it causes somebody great suffering. And his condition, he suffered tremendously, and therefore he held that it did not apply to him. The next thing that happened was that when his servant, his slave, whose name was Tavi, when he died, so Rabbi Gamliel accepted people who came to console him. So the student said, but I thought you told us that you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to accept consolations for a slave who died. Now the issue over here is not the honor of the slave. The issue is that we have to make sure that we keep our slaves and our lineage separate, because the slave is not allowed to marry into a Jewish family because he's not a full Jew. We have to make sure that although he might look like a Jew, because we treat him well, we have to make sure that we know that he's a slave. So we cannot treat our manner of referring to him and respecting him in the same way as we do full-fledged Jews. And therefore we should not accept tanchumin, we should not accept consolation after he passes, to make it clear that he was not a full-fledged Jew, he was a partial Jew because he was a slave. So Rabbi Gamliel said, my servant Tavi was different. I was allowed to accept tanchumin from him because he was a very special person. He was an Adam Kosher, he was a holy man. Now the Gemara comments on the halacha that a chassan doesn't say Shema. The Gemara says that if he wants to, he can. The Gemara quotes that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said, not everybody who wants to say Hashem's name whenever he wants to is allowed to, which seems to indicate that he's arguing. We'll see the Gemara later. Now, the Gemara says as follows: when Tavi, the Eved of Reb Gamliel, passed away, he accepted tanchumin. The Gemara quotes a brisa which discusses a number of halachos about avadim, slaves, and maidservants who pass away. First of all, the Gemara says you do not keep the halacha of shura. Part of the mourning procedure is that after you turn away from the grave, the comforters make two lines, and the avelim, the mourners, walk between them, and they say hamakom inachem. That's a custom you do not do for the burial of a slave. And the Gemara says you do not say birchas avelim, the bracha of avelim, at the first meal after the kvura, the burial. There's a bracha that the mourners say. You don't say that for a slave. And you do not say tanchumi avelim, you do not say the hamakom yanachem, you do not say the sentence which we say to comfort people who are mourners. These three things you do not do for somebody who has lost an eved. So Gemara says, well, there was an incident that happened. Rabbi Eliezer lost his eved, and his talmidim came to console him, but the halacha is that they're not supposed to. So he ran away and he hid in the attic. So they chased after him. So he went and he hid in a shed outside the house, outside a palace of some sort. They chased after him, and then he left there and he went into the house itself, the palace. So they chased him there also. So he turned around and he said, I thought that you guys would be burnt by warm water, meaning I thought you get a hint. But now I see, not only don't you get a hint, even if I make it clear, even if you are drenched in scalding water, you still don't get burnt. Even if I make it as clear as can be, you still don't get it. You're not supposed to come and console somebody who lost an eved. Again, the reason is because we don't want people to think that he was a full-fledged Jew and that his children are. So we don't do shura, the two lines at the graveside. We do not say the bracha of avelim, and we do not say the line of consolation, hamakom inachem. So the Gemara says, okay, so then what do you say to somebody who lost an eved? So he says, well, you say the same thing to him like you say to somebody who lost a donkey or a cow. You say, may HaKadosh Baruch Hu restore your loss. I'm sorry that you lost something valuable. The Gemara brings another brisa. You do not say hespedim. You do not say eulogies on the passing of an eved or a shifcha. So the Gemara says, if he was a special person, if he was a kosher, then you can say the following thing: Oi, he was a good, trusted servant who worked hard and gained from his own work. So they said to him, well, that's the best thing you can say for anybody. If that's what you're going to say for an eved, there's not much more you can say for a regular person. Now the Gemara quotes an interesting brisa. The brisa says that there are only three avos, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. You cannot use the term avos to apply to anyone else, like Shvatim or something. And there are only three imahs, only three mothers of Klal Yisrael. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. You cannot use the term to apply to anyone else. The Gemara says, why not? If the reason is because you going to refer to the Shvatim as the fathers, but maybe you're not from that Shevet, maybe you're not from that father. Someone says that can't be the reason, because then you can't refer to Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. Maybe you're not from Rachel and Leah, so how can you refer to them by the term mothers? So the Gemara says the reason must be that they are not chashuv enough. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah are the only ones who have that chashivas of being called a mother and a father. The brisa continues and says an interesting halacha. in those days, the days of the Brisa, the word for Mr. and Mrs. was Abba and Ima. The way to show respect to an adult was to say Abba Schwartz, Ima Ershkowitz, whatever it is. So the Gemara says you do not refer to an Eved and a Shifcha by those titles. You don't say Mr. Eved and Mrs. Shifcha. It's not a correct way to say it. The Gemara says, but the servants of Rabban Gamliel were called Abba and Ima. They were called Mr. and Mrs. The Gemara says, okay, they were extra special. They were very honor-worthy, very respectable avodim. The Gemara now quotes a pasuk that says something nice about somebody who says Shema and Shemon Esrei. Says the pasuk, Keina varechacho b'chayai, so I will bless you in my life. B'shimcha esa kapai, I'll raise my hands in your name. What does this mean? The Gemara says as follows: Keina varechacho b'chayai, I'll bless you in my lifetime. That is somebody saying Shema. B'shimcha esa kapai, that's somebody saying Shemon Esrei. What about somebody who says things like that? Somebody who fulfills Shema Shemon Esrei. So the next pasuk says, K'moy chelev v'odeshen tisba nafshi v'sifsei renonos yihalo pi. It's like the chelev and the deshen on the mizbeach that fill my soul, and my lips will sing praises of song. That's what the pasuk says about somebody who says Kriya Shema Shemon Esrei properly. Not only that, says the Gemara, but he gets two worlds, Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. Sifsei Renana Yisihalo Fi refers to two worlds. Now the Gemara brings a list of what a number of Chachamim added after their Shemona Esrei. The Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar used to say as follows, Yihi Ratzon Milfonecha Hashem Elokeinu, may it be your will before you, Hashem, Shetishkain Bepureinu Ahava. That you may make our lot filled with love and brotherhood and peace and friendship. And you should make our borders filled with students. And you should make our end successful, and we should accomplish what we have hoped for. You should make our portion in heaven, Gan Eden. And you should make us correct, you should make us proper with good friends, good desires in your world. Venashkim, we should get up in the morning, that our hearts are desiring your fear and your love. And you should take care of all our needs in the proper way. Gemara says that Rabbi Yechanan, when he finished his tefillah, what did he say? May it be your will before you, Hashem. You should look at our embarrassment, and you should stare at our wickedness, our everything that's bad that's happening to us. And you should clothe yourself with your mercy, and you should cover yourself with strength, and you should wrap yourself in your kindness, gird yourself with your graciousness, midas tovcha v'invasanuscha. It should come before you your midah of goodness and humbleness, meaning tzidkus, righteousness. Rav Zera, after he finished his Shemon Esrei, used to say the following thing: may it be well before you, Hashem. We should not sin. We should not be embarrassed. We should not be ashamed. From our forefathers. Rabbi Chia, what did he say after Shemon Esrei? May it be your will that the Torah should be our field, our expertise, our work, and our hearts should not be pained, and our eyes should not be darkened. Rav, what did he say after Shemon Esrei? May it be well before you, Hashem. This should sound familiar to all of us. This is what we say as part of Shabbos Mevarchim and Brachos Daf. May it be your will that you should give us long life. Chaim shel shalom, life of peace. Chaim shel teva, life of goodness. Chaim shel bracha, life of blessing. Chaim shel parnasa, life of proper income. Chaim shel chilas atzamayis, life of outstretched limbs. a sense of serenity. Chaim sheyesh b'hem yiras chet, a life that has within it fear of sin. Chaim she'ein b'hem busha chlima, a life which does not have embarrassment and shame. Chaim she'leish v'chavod, a life of sufficient wealth and respect. Chaim she'tehebanu avas Torah, a life in which we have love of Torah, v'yiras shemayim, fear of heaven. Chaim she'temali lanu es kol mishalas lebeinu l'teva, a life in which you should fill for us all our requests that are good of our hearts. Rebbe, after his davening, he said as follows: May I build a will before you, our God and the God of our fathers. You should save us from rude people who are possibly trying to bother us, and from people who are trying to claim that we are not respectable. There's something wrong with our lineage. From evil people. From bad incidents. From bad desires. From bad friends. From bad neighbors. Satan, from the Satan Hamashches who destroys. Umidin kasha, from difficult judgments. Umibaldin kasha, from people who argue with us and are hard to deal with. Whether you're talking about somebody who is part of the bris or somebody who doesn't have a bris. The Gemara points out, Rebbe was very close with the Caesar, Antony, and there was a legion guarding him at all times, so people shouldn't bother him, but that didn't stop Rebbe from including this particular prayer in his end of Shemona Esrei Seder.